Welcome to the Leaderonomics show, and today we have this guy Clapperton, an author and a journalist. Guy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You've authored a number of books. One of them, I think the most recent, is called This is Social Media.
That's correct, yes. That's why I'm over in KL at the moment. I'm doing a seminar on the subject of social media for small to medium enterprises, and of course anybody else who wants to come along is more than welcome. And we've just revised and updated This is Social Media to reflect some of the stuff that's happened since its original publication in 2009.
Oh, great. You actually started out as a journalist, right?
Yes, I became a journalist in 1989 and worked on the UK trade press in the computer industry. And I noticed even at that stage there was a guy in the corner of the office who seemed, as far as I could make out, to eat sandwiches for a living. But he was always tapping onto his computer, and the odd laugh would come from the corner, and he'd say, such and such a person has just said such and such. And you think, but there's nobody else there. And what he was doing, he was going on to what I would identify as a very early social network. It was UK only, called Kix, C-I-X. And I became very interested in this idea that there was this network of people. 1989, probably 5 people with modems in the country or something. Then a little later on we had CompuServe opening up into Europe, and then AOL, which at the moment is an ISP, but initially there were an awful lot of online forums, online discussions. And so there was suddenly this whole network of people you could talk to. And of course in the more recent years that's exploded into the mainstream, because loads of people have got broadband, loads of people have now got not so much CompuServe as Twitter,
Facebook and so on. So, so that's kind of sparkled your interest into this whole social media space?
I've been using what I would identify as social media since about 1996. Okay. And suddenly something I was doing became fashionable. And I thought, well, you don't waste a thing like that when you're in your 40s, do you? So and I became very interested in what it could do for people in business, and that's how I came to write the book.
Okay. And so what does it do for people in business? Because I think there's misconception with many businesses in regards to the usage of social media, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, first of all, they think it's free, which of course it is.
Right, it is.
In
some way or form. No,
you say it is, but in that you don't have to pay to get in.
Right, that's access to it.
Immediately you have one of your employees sitting in front and working, spending their time on this thing.
So there's some cost associated with
that. It's cost. And you've got to start looking at it in terms of, is it worth the investment? Is it producing the goods? You've got to go in with some sort of objective. You know, so many people think, I ought to do social media because my competition is doing it, or just because everybody appears to be doing it, and it becomes a bandwagon. And unless you actually ask a specific task of social media, whether it's increasing thought leadership, whether it's increasing sales, unless you've actually set an objective, you can't get that objective achieved. So you get a few people who've been on social media for, say, 2 years, and they're saying, it's not doing anything for us. And then I ask them, well, what was it supposed to do in the first place? And they go, well, I don't know. And how can it possibly achieve? I don't know.
Right. So how do we increase sales through social media?
Well, the first thing to do is to start looking for new customers by doing a little bit of research, same as you would any market, see where the customers actually are. If your prospects are all on Twitter, then by all means go in heavily on Twitter. If your prospects are all on Facebook, then by all means go in heavily on Facebook. If they're on LinkedIn, then go for LinkedIn, etc., etc. They may not be there. You know, don't take it for granted that social media is your only way. You know, some people think we're going to do social media, so all their attention goes like a horse with blinkers on to social media, and they lose out on the other stuff. You know, if you're a very small local business, you may be better off delivering leaflets house to house if you do household repairs or something. You know, in a very small localized area. So I think you've got to have that objective, and you've got to, you're increasing sales is a matter of communicating and then persuading people that you've got something worth buying. It's not that different to any other sort of marketing.
Right, right. And you're a copy editor too, right, in some way or form, or you help businesses write communication plans.
I've been doing that. I've done the odd thing about that. Copy editor would mean that I don't make typing errors, and that's just not me at all. No, I certainly will help them put their communications into a form that's going to be a little more readable. Having been a journalist since 1989, that's just one of the things becomes fairly easily.
So with social media, it's pretty much the same discipline, right? When it comes to communication message.
Yes, and that some people do find that quite bewildering. You know, you'll find a perfectly reputable company turns up with a really badly spelled Facebook page or something. You're thinking, well, why are you doing this? This is your shop front. You wouldn't put this in your shop window. But they still do it online. So I try to persuade people that it's a good idea to put things through the spell checker. There's nothing to stop you putting even a 140 character tweet. There's nothing to stop you putting it in Word, spell checking, and then putting it online. It lacks the spontaneity. But if you know you have a problem with that, That said, I have seen a number of very high-profile entrepreneurs, particularly in the UK, who've put a badly spelled tweet out there and someone's picked them up on it, and they've come back and said, yes, I'm dyslexic, it's a medical condition, I can't help this. Why are you picking on someone who's with this condition? You know, which is an entirely valid question.
Yeah, yeah. No, we see also with a lot of the football players in the English Premier League now getting into all these Twitter wars and
yes, because of various injunctions and super injunctions in the UK, I have to be very careful what I say about various footballers because, unlike you, I am subject to the rules of the UK, so they could slap me in prison when I get back there. So yes, all I would just say is yes, footballers are very good at Twitter.
Let's talk about the other book, The Joy of, or the Joy of
The Joy of Work. Yes.
Because it seemed to be a fascinating piece in terms of most people think of work as this drudgery and pain.
I don't know that most people do. I think people like to talk about it as if it's a terrible thing, but. And there are some people who really don't like the jobs, and I think I enjoy my job, and I do think that's a privilege. It's something I've worked for, but it is a privilege, not a divine right, and I'm very grateful for it. But the objective of that particular book, which I co-wrote with Professor Peter Waugh of Sheffield University, he approached me in the first place. Actually, so I'm getting this all in the wrong order. Starting again, this professor approached me because he'd seen some other small business journalism that I'd done, and he said that he'd done this major academic work called Work and Happiness, and he wanted a sort of consumery version of that so that business people could read it. You know, I always think of it as a classic airport book. Not that any airports are selling it at the moment, shame on them, but that's where I'd seen it going. It shows you what I know about marketing. And so I brought in some case studies and brought in some, a bit more lightness of touch, because that's just not part of his world with the academic background that he has. And the idea is to try and get people to sort of test themselves to see how unhappy they really are at work. You actually spend more time at work than you do anywhere else during your waking hours. You probably, a bit of a depressing thought, you probably see more of your work colleagues, or as much as you work with your work colleagues as you do your family. So you might as well actually have a look and see if you're happy with it. If you're happier than you suspect with it, because you say to people, what's wrong with your work? And they say, oh, I just don't like it. And you say, well, what, is the pay bad? And they say, no, the pay's fine. You're not motivated there? Well, I'm motivated okay, and well, is it bad surroundings? No, the surroundings are okay. And what really, the issue really sometimes is they've got it into their head that just work is something you're not supposed to enjoy. Which is a crazy way to be.
So it's really it's really removing that mindset.
It's removing that mindset and seeing if there really is a problem, and then seeing if there's something you can do about it. And it can be something, it needn't cost the employer anything. This is the thing, engaging with people. If you were to, I can see you have various very tired-looking people. You're obviously a terrible slave driver here. But if you were to, if one of them were to say, well, we're really feeling quite unmotivated, could we perhaps get together with a few other local small media companies and set up a five-a-side football tournament once a month? It costs you nothing. Very good idea, probably. Oh, they may think it's a lousy idea, but if it comes from them, yes, you can do this in my company's name, and suddenly you've got a more motivated workforce.
So why don't more companies do that?
I think first, lack of imagination. Second, if the company's ticking over okay, turnover's okay, profit's okay, why change it? You may start fearing the change. You might find that people. You're afraid people will start focusing more on the social bits or more on the newer elements than the core business. But all that can be managed. I know one company in the UK. Sorry to keep using so many UK examples. They decided that they would finish up an hour early on Fridays. And let people form various different clubs. And there was a beer club, funnily enough, on a Friday afternoon. There was also a drum club, a cheese appreciation club. They just suddenly started separating it naturally into all these little interest groups. And it was made clear by management that the work didn't go away, but if they could finish an hour early on Friday, and good grief, those people were motivated every Friday.
Probably were the most efficient on Fridays too. Right?
Well, most efficient on Friday, but then they came back on Monday with Friday so to look forward to, because their employer treated them a bit and treated them, and they let the interest come from those people themselves.
So it's interesting. I mean, as a journalist, right? I mean, how do you get to where you get to? Was there specific steps you had to do in terms of, in terms of developing yourself? If somebody else wanted to become a journalist like you?
Well, I think the first, it's very different now from when it was when I started, because I started, my first few freelance pieces were published, 1988 or thereabouts, at which point it was all hard copy journalism. Online did not exist. Young people today find that very difficult to believe. Online, honestly, didn't exist. No blogs, and blogs are brilliant. The only problem with blogs is there's no real quality control, and nobody to catch your grammatical errors or make sure it's comprehensible to everybody else. Or if it's accurate, well, there's lawyers who will make sure that if you, we're back to English footballers who are very good at Twitter. But the, see, I did that little running gag. But you now have the opportunity to blog as much as you like, as long as you've got something to say, and to establish a very good body of well-written work if that's your inclination. So that's where I would start now. I started off just pitching ideas to any magazine that I thought was small enough to take me when I had no experience whatsoever, write the odd article, then start applying for every job I thought I could manage that was advertised. It took me 8 months to get in, and I got into a computer publication. Then 4.5 years later there was a substantial recession in the UK and I got freelanced. And then after a few months I got freelanced, yeah. And after a few months of that, I realised that I was happier, my income had gone up, and there was really no reason to race back to a staff job. And so I stopped looking and applied myself to freelancing full time. And that was, 18 years ago now, and I haven't looked back. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Did you have a point in time that you knew that you wanted to do journalism? Or?
Yeah, I don't know why. It's just I'm one of these very lucky people. I have achieved a childhood ambition. Now they don't have astronauts anymore. My father worked, although he was a proofreader, which is why I queried your reference to copy editor earlier, but he was a proofreader on the Guardian newspaper, so I always, like all kids, looked up to my dad. He died when I was 19, so I hadn't yet got to the stage where I'd found all his faults and acknowledged him just to be a human being like the rest of us. I was a very late developer, as you can gather from that. That never really went away, but I knew I didn't have the capacity or the interest in going through finding the meticulous mistakes that Dad would as a proofreader. But the actual writing always interested me. I always loved that process and wanted to do something with it. And so it just felt natural to apply for all those.
And so your dad had that profound impact on you.
Yeah, he did, and he was also a published author. He wrote a few thrillers. Didn't sell very much at the time, but yeah, this was always what I wanted to do.
Speaking of a young person who just graduated out of university, and this person comes out and says, "Look, I want to follow your career path." What 1 or 2 pieces of advice would you give that person?
First, do it, because there are so many opportunities to go online and get your word out there. Try to start earning money from it as soon as you can. It's not all about money, of course it's not all about money, but the amount of times you find people who assume that the privilege of being published or being that they think is worth not collecting, and they say, but you'll be able to sell consultancy or something, and then somebody else asks you to come and speak for them and says, you've got all this audience, you'll be able to get lots of consultancy, and eventually you realise that there's an awful lot, you're propping up an awful lot of people's businesses, and if they value their time, what's something I've actually been known to ask people who ask me to do something for nothing is, are you being paid for your time asking me for this? And if you're being paid for your time, why is my time not valuable? That can get a bit confrontational, not always constructive. I freely acknowledge that. So yeah, try to monetize it as soon as you can, because once you've got a few paid clippings under your belt, people will take you seriously. That's like your door opener that says you're not a time waster. Try to build up as many contacts as you possibly can, because they will last you a lifetime until you find that you're in your mid to late 40s and other people think you're the contact that's going to last them a lifetime.
Okay. Now, if going back to that whole social media piece, I mean, if you were to advise a CEO of a small or medium-sized company who's considering social media, what pieces of advice would you give the CEO or the senior leaders there? Well,
find out where your customers and prospects actually are with this at the moment, so don't end up on the wrong social media. Make sure it's coherent, so that there is some sign on your website that you are indeed on the social media and it's not just hived off. Make sure the person or people who are doing your social media for you are empowered and can get to you so when there's a decision that needs, or some action that needs taken, because there's nothing worse than a social media that is unresponsive and just acts as a sort of a shop front. And be responsive. Make sure that that does make an impact, and that people in the office understand that it makes a difference. When I first started writing about e-commerce, this is again late 90s, early part of this century, I did a little experiment. I emailed a whole bunch of car dealers saying I was interested in a new car. Out of 5 car dealers, 1 replied in the early days of email, because they didn't think an email inquiry counted. Now, they didn't know I was a journalist investigating this. They could have been turning away thousands and thousands of pounds worth of business. You can do the same. You can make the same mistake in social media by thinking, oh, it's only coming through Twitter, or it's only a Facebook inquiry. It's a customer waving money in your face, and it could be a very valuable customer who will go on, and because they're on this social media, they'll recommend you to other people, and they're your best recruiter.
Fantastic. Well, we're here with Guy Clapperton on the Leaderonomics show. Guy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate
Thoroughly enjoyed
your
it. Thank you.